Good afternoon, good day, good day. Thank you for tuning in yet again for another wild journey through the mind and the soul. This is a marvelous, and I appreciate your time and attention because that's two things that you cannot get back. So please like, comment, subscribe, dislike, whatever engagement you feel this video calls to you, please do so. But do something. And with that, this is a part two to the um, where did humans come from? So this will be probably a three-part video, but this is part two because the first one was pretty lengthy and there was still a lot more that I wanted to cover because I feel it's very important. This particular one is going to cover, explore the question, what are angels? And how do angels play a part to who we are and where we come from? And so that's what this video is. So I'm going to continue from part one and then segue into what angels are and how angels relate to where we come from and who we are as star beings. So with that, I'm going to pull from this again, like we did part one, from Morals and Dogma and a few other places. So let's continue and get right to it. So, before I get into that, I want to say, when we talk about angels, I want to kind of see where the origin possibly of angels are. Because when you look at the word angels, right, it sounds awfully familiar to the word angle, like mathematical angles, right? So angels, and I'm going to show this, are pretty much nothing more than angles of light. So planetary entities, right, they have light, whether they're light of their own or not. Stars have light. All of this is about light. Your perception is about light. How you perceive things is predicated on how your senses perceive the way angles form a certain particular shape. And based on that shape, you perceive that that's a door. You perceive that that's the color blue. You perceive that this is how something is. So your perception is shaped by the way angles of light in the universe form, and how you perceive those angles and shapes is what shapes your perception. Angels are nothing more than angles of light. So the various positions that the planets and the stars form and how you perceive them is what makes your perception, but that's also what angels are. So I'm going to read what the formal definition of angels are and angles and then make the correlation. So an angel, as it said, is a guardian spirit that acts as an agent or messenger of God. I'm going to read that again. An angel is a guardian spirit that acts as an agent or messenger of God. Okay? An angle is the space between two intersecting lines. Okay. An angel means a supernatural being or spirit found in various religions and methodologies. Angle is a mathematical term that describes the space between two intersecting lines of surfaces divergent from a common point. The word angle is also used to describe a particular way of approaching an issue. So, keep that in mind, right? Angels, they're pretty much messengers of God. Okay, they're spirits, guiding spirits. And they do the bidding of whatever God is, whatever you perceive God to be. Angles are intersecting lines. They form different patterns and degrees. So let's see back what Morals and Dogma 25th degree says. The soul, descending from the celestial limits where the zodiac and galaxy unite, loses its spherical shape. So we already went over how we come from stars, fixed stars. And as these stars leave the constellations that they are in and they descend to other spheres, other planetary bodies to get to Earth, they start to lose their purity. That's what we covered in part one. This is saying they start off as spheres. So let's keep going. The shape of all divine nature, and it's lengthened into a cone. So this is saying that divine nature is spheres. This is an argument that I use against flat earthers, but I won't deviate on that. So the shape of all divine nature is spherical, okay? As it leaves the constellations, it's lengthened from a sphere into a cone. Okay, so now we're talking about mathematics. So the process of us as stars leaving the constellations, getting to Earth, those stars start to lose form. They start to go from spheres to a whole nother shape, and this says cone, right? As a point is lengthened into a line. So now you got spheres, cones, and then within a point you have a line. And then an indivisible monad before. So what is a monad? Because when you deal with these things, language, you start to stretch your language because it's difficult to describe complex concepts because we don't thinking and language is really not something that's natural because we form images in our brain. We're really supposed to communicate images and pictures. So talking and formulating words, that's taxing on the body because the brain processes in images. So if we're not sending images, what they call telepathy, which is what human beings used to do, this is a strain for us. That's why reading is difficult. That's why sometimes people say, well, that's not what I meant. That's because the language in itself is something that's not natural to the brain. So that was a small deviation. But it's important to do that because when you study this stuff, you'll start to encounter words that are foreign to you and they're kind of complicated. You don't want to breeze by it without understanding exactly what you're reading. So a monad is a single unit, a number one. Okay, that's what a monad is, a single unit or number one. So stars, they come from fixed constellations, right? That's where they rest. That's its origin. And then as it starts to make its way away from its origin in these stars, as it goes through the different spheres that we described in part one in these planets, it loses its spherical shape. So stars have a spherical shape. Okay, things in the universe and the galaxy, spheres is the base shape. As it moves away, it goes into a cone. Okay, so it changes. This is the process that I'm describing that becomes to who we are in this flesh and blood, because this is a spacesuit. This body couldn't exist outside of Earth. So this body is the most appropriate body that we have in order for our soul and our consciousness to have a house in this environment that we call Earth. As our consciousness changes, we will start to shed this body and become something different, which is where we're headed. Okay? And once you die, your soul doesn't need this. It actually goes back into the other kind of material that it needs to live in, to dwell in wherever it rests at in these different spheres or planets, etc. Okay? So after a cone, as a point is lengthened into a line. So a point from that cone is lengthened into a line. So now we're talking about mathematics, and this is where we're going to get into angles and how these are angels that we're talking about. And then an indivisible monad before it divides itself and becomes a duad. So it goes from a line that's indivisible, single unit, and then it divides itself into two. Okay? That is, unity becomes division, disturbance, and conflict. So the basis of all creation is duality. Period. That's why that's reflected by the energy of Gemini. So anytime you create something, the basis of that is in duality. So when you create something, if you cannot process what you're creating and its opposing force to you creating it, then the chances of your success is minimal. Now, it says, then it begins to experience the disorder which reigns in matter, to which it unites itself, becoming, as it were, intoxicated by draughts of grosser matter. So as it gets further away from the stars, it gets more into matter, and then it's corrupted. That's pretty much what draughts of gross mean. It becomes gross, like nasty. Matter is nasty compared to the purity of the realms outside of Earth, of which inebriation of cup of Bacchus. Okay, now let's go skip over here so we can get to angles. In the ancient doctrine, certain genii were charged with the duty of conducting souls to the bodies destined to receive them and of withdrawing them from those bodies. So genii is just plural for genius. Now what is genius? If you look at the etymology of genius, genius is a spirit. right? Genius is in fact, let's read it. Now, this is coming from a book called, and walk with me here, because I'm going to slowly get into what angels are, but it's important to understand that as stars, for us to get from stars in in the galaxy, from these constellations to this human form is a process. In part one, we went over some of that process. In this one, we're going to go over that those stars need help, because that journey is something that could be new or could be I don't want to say risky, but those stars need guides or help from what people call God or the Most High or the creative force. And those guides are angels, right? These angels guide stars on their journey until they get into a woman, until the woman has birth and they become what they call a human being. So in order for that process to succeed and get pulled off without a hitch, they need help. And those helpers are angels. Those angels are tasked with making sure that those souls from the stars get to its journey and destination here on earth. So what we're about to read is that these guides are spirits, and these spirits have instructions to help. Now, let's look at what genius is. This is from the book called The Geography of Genius. And it's good to have many different books, because if you pull stuff from books that have nothing to do with each other, and then you start to see things that overlap, that's how you start to get a crystal clear picture of what truth is. And then you start to get to more objective truth, less of your bias, because if you pull from sources that really have nothing to do with each other, topics don't relate, but yet you see little things in one that relate to another, you start to say, well, there's got to be some truth in this, because these things don't relate to each other. Okay? Now, genius. The word beguiles, but do I really know what it means? It comes to us from the Latin genius, but it meant something very different in Roman times. Back then, a genius was a presiding deity that followed you everywhere, much like a helicopter parent, only with supernatural powers. The word genie stems from the same root. Every person had a genius, every place too. Cities, towns, marketplaces, all possessed their own presiding spirit, a genius loci that continuously animated them. The current dictionary definition: extraordinary intellectual power, especially as manifested in creative activity, is a product of the 18th century romantics, those brooding poets who suffered for their art, and we now say for their creativity. So, everything has a genius, and a genius is a spirit that follows entities around and presides over people, places, and things. Now, this book has nothing to do with this. This is saying that certain geniuses or genies or spirits, and that's where demons come from. If you look at the etymology of demon, you'll see daemon, and daemon goes to genius, right? So in the etymology of demon, you'll see genius. And so geniuses were charged with the duty of conducting souls to the bodies destined to receive them and of withdrawing them from these bodies. According to Plutarch, those were the functions of Proserpine and Mercury. In Plato, a familiar genius accompanies man at his birth. Now, we just read that. Follows and watches him all his life, and at death conducts him to the tribunal of the great judge. These genii are the media of communication between man and the gods, and the soul is ever in their presence. This doctrine is straight in the oracles of Zoroaster, and these genii were the intelligences that resided in the planets. So, what are we saying? We have souls, right, coming from the fixed stars. In order for these souls to get to Earth, they need help. And the help is from these angels. Now, or from these spirits. These spirits are angles. So when you have certain planets that exist, those are what you call the gods, because we already went through each planet shapes the soul and the star in order for it to learn certain things. So the concept of desire, the concept of jealousy, the concept of fraud, the concept of business. All of these things are learned from the planets. The soul goes through, and whatever the nature of these aspects are learned from the planets. As the soul, the star, goes through these planets and these spheres, this is where they pick up these things that we quantify as characteristics, personality traits, emotions, things of that nature. Now, along with the planets, these stars and these planets form angles, right? Now, being that we're dealing with intelligent entities, planets, stars have an intelligence of their own, just like human beings and animals have an intelligence of their own. As certain planets and angles, planets are known to the ancients as the gods. Whenever you talk about the gods, tend to want to talk about these big planetary entities that have intelligence that shape everything that goes through the planets. Then you have the stars and the constellation and all of these heavenly bodies. As certain heavenly bodies form certain angles, 30 degrees, 45 degrees, 90-degree angles, they take on a certain new intelligence. And this intelligence represents a gatekeeper, or they have specific duties that are formed from these angles being formed. So as certain angles form, it creates a whole new intelligence in the galaxy. These intelligences stand as security guards, or gatekeepers, or stormtroopers, or peace guardians, that have specific duties and instructions based upon where they're located in the galaxy and based upon which other intelligence passes through their gates. You see movies like Guardians of the Galaxy. Imagine that. Guardians of the Galaxy, in essence, is really a description of angels and gods and what happens throughout the galaxy. That certain intelligences can't pass through certain spheres in the galaxy unless they have accomplished, or unless they have went through a certain process. If you didn't go through this certain process as an intelligent being, whatever it is, a star or whatever the case, you can't go past that certain sphere. Angels are these guardians that assist intelligences like us as human beings, or should I say star beings in material form, to what we need to do to get to another level. That's what angels are. And these angels are formed by angles of light. So in your astrology chart, when they say you're a Cancer, you're a Capricorn, you're a Pisces, what that's saying is that at the time you was born, where you was born, has a certain relationship to other planets, other stars, and then that relationship is quantified by angles. So if you're born in California here on planet Earth, and the planets were a certain position based upon how the Earth moves, rotates, that forms certain characteristics that you have inside you, which are fixed. As you go through more experiences, the angles in the galaxy constantly are changing on a second by second, minute by minute, daily, yearly, monthly basis. As these things change in the galaxy, your character, which was codified at birth, has an effect with the shape that those planets have to Earth and the constellations have as everything moves around. And this is what we call experience. These different movements and angles are watched over and protected and guarded by angels, which have their own origin, which have their own angles and specific creation. And when they're created and these angles are formed, that intelligence has a function. So these intelligences function, which is pretty much angles. This is complicated, so I hope I'm not losing everybody. They are responsible for making sure that various energies and intelligences get to where they need to go. That's pretty much what angels are. So when you're looking up at stars, when you see the planets, when you think about the galaxy, some of these angles form intelligences, and these intelligences have a static or fixed or representation wherever they're located in the universe. Okay? and then they have a specific function. Now, over the course of time, being that man has elevated to certain levels, they observe these type of functions, and they realize that certain things happen at certain times. As these things happen at certain times, they have ascribed names to phenomena, and these names that they described in these different events and phenomena that they observed in Earth with their interface with the planet that they live in, and in the other planets, they put names to it. And because of the power that they observe it has over planet Earth, they considered them gods, right? And they considered them angels. But all gods and angels are energies and intelligences that have manifested through the creation of the universe and have been fixed in their creation based upon the angles that those intelligences were birthed out of when all of these movements of these celestial bodies took place. So if a celestial body in the creation of the universe interacted with another creation, depending upon the magnitude of that intersection between those heavenly bodies and the angle form, it created a whole new being or entity. And that whole new being or entity now has its own purpose. So just like we have a purpose, these entities and intelligences formed from these angles in the solar system and the universe have their own purpose. And a lot of their purpose is to guide stars, which is us, or stars before it becomes human, to particular destinations, on their particular journey. Just like in the movie Soul. When the souls were there, you had individuals depicted in the movie that were responsible for helping the souls get to where they needed to go. That's what angels are. So anytime you're thinking of angels, just think of the different movements of the planet at different points in time, and those different movements form a whole new intelligence. And those intelligences are guarded and managed by intelligence that were already existent for eons and eons and eons. That's what the gods are. That's what the angels are. Okay, all of that interfaces from where we come from. So your guardian angel, as we read, you're born with your own spirit, your own geni or genius. That genius stays with you until you die. And if you don't manifest what your soul's purpose is here, it torments you, it nudges you, it bothers you. That's what demons are, right? Demons aren't these ghouls and goblins that you see flying around with evil faces, right? Demons is your spirit that you're born with that's nudging you to manifest all the things that your soul chose to manifest when it was a fixed star, and it could only manifest that on other planes, this plane being Earth. And if you don't manifest it, these demons torment you and haunt you. If you do manifest it, then you're called a genius. You understand what I'm saying? So unmanifested material, unmanifested destiny, unmanifested achievement for your soul's purpose is a demon. Manifested achievement and fulfilling your soul's purpose is genius. They go hand in hand. It's synonymous. And these angles of light, as time goes on, guide you to what your genius is. And it also reflects what your demons are. So that's very important. So just remember, the angles that's formed, because like how the moon is in a different sign or constellation, it's a whole different energy. These things are governed by other higher angles, more powerful angles and influences, experiences. Now, a good example, and I'm going to wrap up, of what I'm talking about. If you see the TV show Lucifer, right? That's a good show. And it gives you a real context of who Lucifer is without the spooked out fear that religion does. Lucifer had many siblings. One of his siblings was the archangel Uriel. And Uriel's power was being able to manipulate patterns and sequences here on earth. So when humans seen those patterns, it affected their life. Because according to the TV show, angels and archangels couldn't interfere in human experiences. So what Uriel did was he'll do something like he'll cause a traffic jam, and then in that traffic jam, it will delay a person going to work or going to their meeting. And in delaying going to their meeting, they might make a detour and go somewhere else. As they go somewhere else, they get hit by a car. This is how angels operate, and they do that by um, it's the angles of your light. It's the angles of perception. Because in that example they perceived the traffic jam, right? The patterns were manipulated, the angles were manipulated. It changed the whole course of the purpose and plan for that person's day. This is how angels operate. So all angles are angels. Angels are angles. So if you're talking about your perception and your experiences, you got to look at the angles that Earth is related to other planets. And those angels manifest at different points in your life. Then you have your main genius or angel or spirit that's with you until you die to nudge you to manifest the sole reason why you came from a star system here. So that was a lot, even for me, to explain. I hope to some degree I was clear. If I wasn't clear, please leave it in the comment section. And, accept my apology in advance. But I wanted to lay that down, and then that'll be good for part 3, which is coming up. So with that, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your attention. 2 things you can't get back. Subscribe, like, share, comment, dislike, whatever. Just engage so we can take each other to the next level. Peace.